Today we celebrate the life of our beloved Barbara, Lucille. There is part of her life in each of her sons' grandchild. Without her, our own present life would not happen as it happened and meant to be by Creator's providence. And we're very grateful for sending her as our mother, mother-in-law, grandmother. The whole country is grateful to her as to the daughter of the American Revolution for her brave ancestors. I noticed her character in both of my children. She was a very remarkable woman of her own, but never showed off. I will always remember her as a very kind, modest, and caring person. She never demonstrated fake theatrical love. Instead, her love for people was real and touching to our hearts. I realized how quiet and beautiful her soul was and will continue to be forever. Maybe even me and her met in some of our previous lives because she always wanted to go with me to visit Russia, especially St. Petersburg, and my grandfather was born there. Plus, it is my favorite city too. Who knows, maybe she lived there. Honestly, I thought that she will never die. I was afraid that we will all die before her and was worrying all the time about who then will take care of her. But she decided to leave us earlier than I expected it to happen. For about a year or so, she periodically said that she wanted to go home to her parents in Ocean View. The Ocean View is the street in Fullerton where our family lives. She grew up there in the beautiful house built by her parents in 1920s, which had some of the ocean view in the distance before many buildings were erected in between them. At the end of her life, she moved to Coronado, with the real ocean view right from the balcony and never stopping sound of the waves day and night. I was surprised to notice that the road to this cemetery has the same name, Ocean View. This Ocean View picture is like an indication of the life which this great soul of her lived. It was big as an ocean, high as the sky, and very tender as the breeze in the hot Californian weather. Her soul is mighty and beautiful, all together in that union of harmony of universe. But because Fred thinks that she is in heaven now and can't understand Russian language, I calculated her real name in Old Slavic Orthodox tradition, which sounds like Velopera, and will say short clarification to her in the language she understands now. Slava Veloperi Barbari Lucille Langbets. Slava Veloperi Barbari Lucille Langbets. Slava Veloperi Barbari Lucille Langbets. Ura Veloperi Barbari Lucille Langbets. And glory to God in the highest.
Maybe any number of these things gathering together, a sense of maybe even a sense of peace in some ways. But as we gather today, we gather to do a couple of things. We gather to hear the promises that God has given to us that remind us that our earthly lives have limitations on them. We are here to comfort one another as we face a future without somebody who has been very intimate in our lives. And we're here also to join together as family and friends to receive the comfort that we receive from each other. So as we gather here today, let us remember the good things and perhaps forgive some of the harder things, but let us come together to experience the joy of being in worship. And as much as I would like to do everything from here, my papers are up here, I know I feel farther away, but I'll be right here. And I brought my Stanford hat in honor of Barbara today, but I won't wear it during the service. Barbara, which is everybody here, knew how deeply she loved life and with how she lived that life with passion and energy and strength and pursued for those that she loved and cared for, that quality of life that is God's best intention for each and every one of us. Style, her warm smile, and the special way she touched so many here today will live far beyond this hour. So we come here this afternoon to remember Barbara and to give thanks for the legacy that she left for each and every one of us. Barbara Lane was born April 28th, 1926, up in Anaheim, California, up in Orange County, the daughter of Harold and Helen Lang, who owned a small orange grove in the city of Placentia. Barbara was the oldest of 3 children, and after she was born, they moved from their house in Placentia over to Fullerton, and then her 2 younger brothers were born, Gilbert and Larry. She went through the Fullerton school system, and although I can't attest to it with seeing her report cards, I assume she had top grades along the way, and was always involved in sports. But the hobby that she loved the most was singing and dancing. She attended Fullerton Union High School, and a few years later, in 1986, was recognized and placed into their Wall of Fame. She was in high school when World War II started, and she spent her free time working for the Red Cross, rolling bandages, singing and dancing at USO events, and doing whatever needed to be done. She also worked for the Hunt brothers, which later became Hunt Wesson. That's what I remember when I was up there at Fullerton. And at the age of 15, she was put to work on the graveyard shift, working at 12-hour shifts, I think it's about 7 or 8 at night till in the morning, managing 150 braceros, or the Mexican crew that had come up in order to help with the harvest and to take care of things. And she worked in the cannery, as especially important during the war. She also grew a victory garden, which I think someone said was like 3 acres, not bad. And she gathered food and brought it to stores and helped the family ranch on their orange groves, and was not afraid to throw around irrigation pipes and make things work. She was truly a farmer at heart. As a woman in today's world, she attributes her success and to her work ethic that she picked up from her father, who always inspired her to get the best she could in education. And after high school, and we estimate that would be 1943-ish, war still going on, she headed off to Stanford University, one that I'm familiar with, and all of my many siblings. Yeah, go Stanford. I was in love with the Indians. They were Indians back then, but by the time I got there, they just changed the name to a color. Who could believe that? But you also need to know a little bit about Stanford. Back in that time, Jane Leland Stanford had put a limitation on how many women could be there because she wanted to have a balance, a good balance there, and she was starting to see the women take over. So she put in the rule of 500, and that got overthrown. But it took a few years for that to work through. So it meant that you had a fairly elite set of women that came in there that were very capable. And she was among the most capable of the capable, and magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa at Stanford. While she attended there, she had a few interesting things. She used her dance and knew all the Spanish and South American dances as well, and would often go to the parties and dance with the children of diplomats and leaders of other nations. Probably, or perhaps through that connection and her fluency in Spanish, she got drafted to become an interpreter, and she interpreted for the president of Uruguay, and there was a second one there too. I can't remember that one offhand, but very capable. And then she was drafted as the United Nations Charter was being pulled together. Her skills were used in part of that. She met her husband Roby there in 1948. They were married a little north of here, up in San Clemente, in a large wedding. And then after graduation from Stanford, she and her husband Roby went to Balboa Law School at Balboa University. And I'm sure her husband was encouraging her to do the things. Obviously she didn't need any help, trying difficult tasks along the way, but it always helps to have a partner that's encouraging you to do those things. And so after they finished law school, she opened a practice in Orange County. In 1953, the family was enlarged from 2 with the addition of Chauncey, and then a little bit after that, 2 more sons were added to the mix, and the family grew a little bit larger along the way. And in the end of the 1950s, early 60s, the 2 ended up divorcing and heading out in a different direction. And in 1962, Bert and Barbara were married, and Bert had been elected in a statewide office as the treasurer of the state of California, and they were a year or 2 into that. They were married in San Francisco by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Bert was a pilot, B-52 pilot, not B-52, B-24, a little bit different than a 52. But the 52 is almost as old. I mean, it's going on as old as we are. But if you know all of the many things she's involved in, that was one of the clubs that she pitched into to help things out. Probably the story I like the best relates to football. I was a football player, and so I could appreciate this. And she was the attorney for Lance Allworth, a very well-known wide receiver for the Chargers, and John Hadle, the quarterback. And they apparently had come back from a planning commission meeting, and as they were sitting around talking and figuring out, what had happened at the meeting, her purse tipped over and rolled out a gun, a pistol that she was packing. And the two football players were, what's going on here? But she certainly was never afraid of firearms, a member of the NRA, and very comfortable with taking care of herself, or at least being ready to do that, very much in her personality. Well, I need to back up a little bit for Stanford. Back then, women's intercollegiate sports didn't really exist, but they did have many intramural ones, and a number of years later, 1980s or 90s, Stanford went back and recognized that, we sort of limited women's roles back then, and so they awarded what they call the Block S, which is the letter for athletes. I've got my Block S, but my wife was a field hockey player, and she got her Block S, and likewise Barbara got hers as well, and we were trying to figure out what sport it was for, but it was either basketball, field hockey, swimming, or for all of them, and probably a few more after that we can hardly keep count of. She was obviously involved in many political ventures. She ran for state assembly one time. She was a delegate to I think she was an alternate delegate to one of the national conventions to pick the president or the presidential candidate. And then she also partnered with Bert to write a couple of books, including A Decade of Fiscal Responsibility in 1967. Boy, I think we could pull that book out and learn a few things today. And then A Citizen Answers. So many areas of capability. There are too many clubs to try to even mention and to keep track of, but I do think it would be helpful to get a little better idea of how those people who loved her, who surrounded her, experienced her. And so we have the four sons who are going to share here, and I'm going to invite them to come up, and that mic's going to be a little easier to use. And first is up is Chauncey, unless the order has been changed. So
good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming today. We appreciate the pastor coming out today. As he pointed out, all of you know Mom from all of her stories. She shared all of those email reflections over the years, and it's hard to come up with anything that you haven't heard or read already. So I'm going to try to throw a couple things at you that maybe you haven't heard and that can be repeated here anyway. So, briefly, a couple of Stanford stories I enjoyed was, yes, she did start out being chauffeured to the San Francisco cocktail parties to translate for South American leaders. But that didn't crimp her style all that much, because as soon as that job was over, she continued going out dancing every night, which led the dorm mom to confront her about, was that why she thought her parents were paying all this tuition for her to be at Stanford? And Mom was sort of nonchalant about it. The next question was, well, what are your grades? Mom said, they're all A's. And the woman went and pulled her transcript, and that was the last time Mom heard from her. She also had occasion that first year after finals to be called in out of the blue by her professor a week later and told to sit down in the exam room and take the test over again. And she didn't really know why, but she did it. And then afterwards he looked at it and he said, okay, either you were cheating or you have a photographic memory. I guess you have a photographic memory. So then she was often sitting through her Stanford classes knitting the whole time. I don't know what professors would have thought about that. And of course, after she met my father at Stanford, they married in 48 and went to law school together. And she took the bar exam and passed the first time. Not only passed, but next thing she had these state bar examiners knocking on her door and wanting to know how she had done so well on the exam, having attended an unaccredited law school. And she explained that besides the textbooks that everybody studies, there's backup treatises, and she went to those books and reviewed all those books too and outlined them on her own. So she taught herself all of that. So that explained why she had done so well. And her beginnings in the law were certainly unique. You may have heard Mom say that she never felt she was at a disadvantage being a woman in a man's profession. And I see that in ways. I understand that when she was first sworn in, the second swearing in was for the federal court, and when the judge was said, we'll select one of the new people to come up with you for a picture, lo and behold, the only woman in the group, oh, let's bring her up to be with me. And she regularly attended the County Bar Association meetings, which were also attended by Earl Stanley Gardner, who was the author of Perry Mason. And he lived in Temecula and would attend the bar meetings just to kind of keep his fingers in it. He didn't practice at all. But as soon as he met Mom, and every time he did happen to be there, he always insisted she be on the dais with him. So again, all these experienced lawyers are wondering, why is the new lawyer up there with him? So she was now, and that brings me to my personal experience. Mom started doing trial work right away, and lo and behold, in August of 1953, went into labor during one of her trials. Now, some women might stop what they're doing and think it's time to go to the hospital, but not Mom. She went ahead and finished the trial, got her verdict, and then went home and said it's time to go have Chauncey. And she didn't take any maternity leave to speak of. She likes to tell me the story. Oh yeah, 2 weeks after you were born, we were down in San Diego, and I knew the manager of the Spreckles Theater there, and I wanted to go see a new movie, Magambo. So I took you for your own private screening of a movie. Thanks, Mom. I can't say I remember much about it. But she might ask herself why in the world she was taking me to San Diego when I'm 2 weeks old. Well, it turns out one of the trial judges was very fond of children. So she said whenever she had a less than stellar case, she would drag me along, hand me to the judge during her presentation of her evidence. The judge would play with me on the bench and ignore the bad parts, and inevitably she'd come out ahead on her case. So yes, as a woman, she was using everything at her disposal. When I was just 3 years old, Mom got the idea it was time to take a trip to Mexico. So she just bought a new car. She hired a high school girl. She packed her gun, and the three of us went off on an 8,000-mile trip throughout Mexico. No qualms with Mom. She was not the least bit worried. We were in big towns. We were in small cities everywhere. The only thing I remember of that trip was one of the hotels, the swimming pool was a black water. Not that it was dirty, although at first I wasn't sure, and it was filled with gardenias, and I'm jumping off the diving board with my orange life jacket, and every time I come up, I've got all these flowers in the life jacket, which kind of reminded me another thing. Mom insisted we know how to swim, but her way of doing that was putting us those orange Coast Guard life jackets on. You could hardly go underwater if you wanted to. And she'd take it off when she managed to swim well enough, you could take yourself underwater with that whole thing floating on you. So, okay, you're drown-proof now. We took another trip to Mexico when I was 5 years old. I remember a little bit more about that trip. I specifically remember that we ended up on the Sea of Cortez, and we were at a restaurant having dinner, and we were having swordfish that night. I had no idea what swordfish was. And the staff showed me pictures of a swordfish. You see the bill, I'm like, oh my word. And they told me that the way they caught that fish was Mom went swimming with bait around her neck. And it came up and took the hook and went off to a reel and reeled it in. With my mother, I didn't doubt that one bit. In fact, that led to a story shortly after that I've since heard her tell where in their law office, my father had just given her a watch for some celebration they were having. And being in Oceanside, they represented a lot of Marines. And sometimes the Marines are on the other side of the case. And not happy when you're representing a soon-to-be ex-wife. So one day as she's looking at this diamond watch, this Marine came storming in with his K-bar knife in hand, screaming and yelling, and everybody froze. And he got in the room where Mom was. She screamed, "You put that damn knife down and get the hell out of here right now." The guy was so shocked, he dropped the knife, turned around and walked out. So she was fearless, to say the least. So many stories and so many things I don't want to repeat for you, but I know some stories that Fred may be sharing, so I want to watch out I don't share some of those, but one of the stories I I will say, so starting out with her in her legal career, although she never shared any of those fees for all my hard work, riding the judge with whatever I was doing on the bench. But she was representing one of the Hills brothers up in Sacramento regarding our infamous airport property up there. And a deal had fallen through and he was being sued and she couldn't represent him because of that. So she asked me to represent him. And there were 3 brokers who'd been on the other side of the deal. And so I took their depositions, and I won't bore you with a lot of legal details, but if you've been parties to a lawsuit, you can all sit through a deposition. And of course, if I'm the lawyer asking questions, I just so you don't, because then you all prep each other. But these guys came in one at a time, not rehearsed, but each one of them, they described their interaction with Mom. She was the most horrific being, creature you could ever meet in your life, just stubborn and obnoxious and threatening, and it never stopped as it went on and on and on, and one after another, slightly different verbiage. And we finished up, and the plaintiff's attorney, who was a well-known attorney in town, and I'd known for a while, he looks at me and goes, "Well, do you know this Mrs. Betts?" I said, "Yeah. As a matter of fact, I do. It's my mom." He said, "Oh my God, no idea. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what to say. I mean, it's their testimony." And I said, "Well, I'll give you a little hint." He goes, "What?" And I said, "As someone who was raised by her, tell your clients they got off easy." And they dismissed the case the next day. So thank you again for coming out. I appreciate the pastor. I especially want to thank Randy and Leanne and Terry for being here today. We appreciate that. And Shay and Lena and Rose, thank you for taking such good care of mortals.
By Oliver Berkman. And first I saw the title and I thought, I got a plan 4,000 weeks. What's this all about, you know? And I'm not going to do that many to-do lists. But as I've started to read it, I realized the really import of it was something completely different. It was all about how all these to-do lists and all this sort of thing isn't the important thing about managing your time. His 4,000 weeks was to say, if you count on an average life of somewhere around 77 years, you've got 4,000 weeks. That's all you've got. And that's what you should really be focused on when you plan your life and when you go about your life. And my mom had a little extra than that. I figured it out. She died one day before her 97th birthday, so she got off with 5,044 weeks instead of the 4,000. But she used it pretty well, and she had a pretty adventuresome life. And I think one part that she remembered the most and that she loved the most was her childhood. She really loved the ranch. She talked often about her father and about her relationship and those adventures as a child. They were one of the most important things that she remembered and talked about in her later years. And especially, she had such a close relationship with her father, and she loved her father so much. She used to watch a lot of movies and TV with us, and one of her favorite movies was to watch over and over John Wayne movies, especially McClintock. And she told me why she loved watching it so much. She said, "He reminds me of my father." And I love so much watching that movie because every time I think of my father. And I know what she talked about because I lived with Helen and Harold for a while. And a story about how Harold was, as an example, when he was in his early 80s, he caught some 20-something guy from the neighborhood stealing his grapefruit. And so he knocked him down the hill. And the 20-something guy called the police, and the police came and got both sides of the story. And so they came back because we wondered if he was going to get arrested. The guy had called the police and was thinking about pressing charges for battery. So the officer came back and he said, "Well, I've got both sides of the story. And, he said he was battered and that you threw him down the hill. And, I believed him. But you've told me the guy was trying to steal your grapefruit." And I told him, "Well, this gentleman can also press charges against you for stealing grapefruit." And he said, "But when I talked to him a little more about it, Mr. Lang, he decided to drop the charges and not go forward because I explained to him, 'Let me see, sir, you want to go to court and you want to explain to the judge and jury how a man in his 80s kicked your ass. You're sure you want to tell everybody about that?' And the young man thought of it, decided, oh, never mind, I'm not going to press charges. But that's an example of her father that she loved so much. And back in his day, he was really tough, tougher than he was in his 80s. So her youth was her dream, most of all. But she had a good time in her, young days, in her teenage days. We've heard about working at the cannery, and that inspiration to learn Spanish came from her father. Her father told her, "You're going to need Spanish," and she took it to heart, and it influenced so much of her life, as you've already heard. So I won't go into that. Let's see. She also, another thing she enjoyed in her youth, by the way, is she was a real tomboy. And for instance, she loved to play Tarzan with John Raitt, who was Bonnie Raitt's father. And they would play Tarzan. He was quite a bit older than her. Harold was coaching him. He was on the track and field team. John Raitt was. Anyway, John Raitt would play Tarzan. They would play it on the sycamore trees in the front yard. Well, later in life, she actually had a date with what we consider the real, honest-to-goodness only Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller. But she wasn't that impressed with him, so in person. Let's see. She also, when she was a teenager, she and a girlfriend of her used to like to swim out and hang on the anchor chain of Errol Flynn's boat, but they never did meet him when doing that. But let's see. I've already gone through some of this. Her favorite thing about Stanford, I think, was the dancing and the music, and she also participated in a band as a singer. So I don't know if that's coming up. But and in law, the interesting thing about it is she was, of course, a great attorney, and you've heard some of the stories, and she's well remembered for that and very famous for that. But when I was first going to law school, she took me out to dinner, and she said, "Well, I hope you like the law. I never did." And I don't know what she meant by that, because I think she did get a lot out of the law, but she had also said that when she was young, when she was going to Stanford, her plan was to be a diplomat. And that's what she really wanted to do, to be an ambassador or something like that. But she called up the State Department and she checked with them, and they said, "Well, we don't hire any women except as secretaries." So back then, she realized she wasn't going to get anywhere in the State Department, so she went into law, which was something that she could make inroads in, and it took Shirley Temple to make some inroads in as an ambassador for women. But let's see. In her these later years, I'm so much appreciated being able to go down there and bring my children, and Barbara was named after her. She got very along well with my daughter Barbara. They both loved watching murder mysteries. It was their absolute favorite, and all kinds of murder mysteries. My wife used to love to watch the musicals with her and the comedies. Barbara also loved watching all the old movies with her. Let's see, Dasha used to go down there and organize things and help her with so many things, and she loved how hard a worker Dasha was. And after Dasha left, she'd say, "When's Dasha coming again? When's Dasha coming again?" And they also loved music, and she appreciated how Dasha was doing a lot of music and singing and whatnot. But and then Teddy, she appreciated him. He was building sand castles on the ocean and doing so many creative things like that. So, and they used to love to watch Hogan's Heroes, and some of those kind of programs were things that Teddy could appreciate. So we all appreciated the time we spent with her in Coronado. That's about all I have to say. Oh, I'm sorry. One story that Chauncey held back and that I meant to tell. Eric one time invited me to a San Diego County Bar Association meeting, and while there I met a couple people who actually knew Barbara. And the one old man comes up to me and he says, "Well, Barbara Hayes was your mother?" And I said, "Yes, she was." And he said, "Is she still as ornery as she used to be?" Well, at risk of trying to conduct some forensic psychology, I thought I would discuss my perspective on some of the major influences in my mom's life that affected how she was. And I think the first one that came to mind was her relationship with her father and her being a tomboy. And also, I think spending time with Harold and his friends was influenced her lifelong ability to swear so effectively. I think that the seminal event in her life was her experience in World War II. And my brothers and I joke about having retro parents, and that in some ways their lives were kind of frozen in time in the 40s and 50s. But for good and for bad, I think as far as hard work ethic and sharing a horror about the horrors of war, but also leading to lifelong prejudices which never resolved against certain ethnic groups. And this, I don't want to be negative, but I want to be honest, because each of us have very complex lives, good and bad. And the next element is kind of been alluded to, but has some negative effects as well. And that is, one of the things that she shared with me well after I was an adult is it's been mentioned her being tough in court and feeling that in order to be an effective lawyer, she needed to be serious and hard. But she admitted to me that some of that had its effect in her family life, and that she had a hard time being emotionally available to her children. And that was one of her biggest regrets that she expressed, because her emotional aloofness in raising us messed us up. And she recognized after the fact that it was a difficult trade-off, and one which, in retrospect, she regretted having made. I think another major influence in her life was her marriage to my dad, and it was mentioned how she loved dancing, she loved partying, she liked to accompany him on gambling trips and drinking. And the good news is, my biological father was a fun guy, but he also was a gambler, and shared some of the family tendency to lose generational wealth, so that it disappeared to a large extent by the time our generation come around. And I think some of his characteristics also caused a rift in the marriage. Obviously, Bert's personality was very different than Roby's. And a very interesting transition took place in my mother's life in marrying Bert, in that she was so incredibly devoted to him that she was willing to curtail some of the aspects of things that she loved for the sake of the marriage. And some of her devotion, the degree of devotion to Bert also remained a mystery to us, because at times it felt like she was being forced to choose between her husband and her children. Never a situation that's enviable to be placed in, but she consistently seemed to side with Bert, and that's, you can have different feelings about that, but it's an important aspect of her life. And then I think that with age, hopefully we tend to kind of mellow, and I think certainly my mom with age
the hard edge softened, and she became more emotionally available. I think especially after no longer having to practice courtroom law, her softer side became manifest, and I think she was able to mend some bridges with other family members over time. And I appreciate that while she held some grudges indefinitely, a lot of those grudges, or her ability to forgive and to change over the years, I think is enviable. And I appreciate that for many of us, our relationship with Mom was better in adulthood than in our childhood and our early adulthood.
Hi, Bruce.
Thank you. Those are really hard acts to follow. I trust my brothers to, be inept in my brain, but God, they're really good speakers. It's really annoying. So I pulled out some notes that I'd made before, and I wanted to talk about, her. And she was warm. She liked everyone. She showed unconditional love. She loved kittens and unicorns. She and I'd play games for hours together. Sorry, wrong notes. Oh, my mom was strong, tough, and accomplished. And you've heard about her many accomplishments here. You've heard about her toughness, her edge, and there's not a lot I can add. I will add the somewhat of a follow-on to that she always spoke her mind, for better and for worse. She was very open, shared what she was thinking, and she felt, would tell us that basically contrasting with my dad, who's Bert, that she would get all of that stuff out, and then she was more relaxed, whereas he would do what I try to do, which is push it deep down inside, and it hurts, but it's a different way of doing things, and I think they both have advantages and disadvantages. Unfortunately, she would say everything she was thinking, but sometimes that was good. Mom, she, excuse the use of notes, but she definitely did not bottle things up. She had one of her quotes as another insight into Mom was from Gone with the Wind. Always loved quoting Scarlett O'Hara that tomorrow is another day, and that would get her through whatever typically, and again, not necessarily bad. I learned a lot from her. I certainly learned a love of learning, of achievement. She was into competition and achievement, which is why I'm concerned now that there will be a vote who had the best talk afterwards. And I'm not looking good, but Mom would have wanted us to judge everything as much as possible. I do want to point out something different, which is she was a person of unexpected contradictions, and so she was all these amazing things, including she was the first female city attorney in California. But this is the same person who would see any reference to feminism and really hate on it. She was very anti what she perceived as feminist, and always did the dresses. I mean, at least again, I can only speak on my portion of life. She had a varied life. Dresses and lipstick and high heels. And so it kind of, and as mentioned by some of my brothers, saw being a woman as an advantage in her work, etc. She was a tomboy, as has been mentioned as a younger person, and then went on to be quite the feminist projection later on. Sorry, said that wrong. Feminine projection, it's a very different sentence. And she was, I'll leave you head towards kind of a final image that I keep of Mom because it entertains me, which is she would go in this dichotomy of Mom from her day of being a lawyer and a real estate broker and hard-edged, and then she would go out to the ranch that they bought outside of Sacramento, and she would take off the high heels, she'd put on rubber boots, she would leave the floral dress, she would throw a hat on and grab a shovel and then start walking the fields and irrigating and hanging out with the cattle, and she was just happy as a clam. And so she had these different sides to her that made her a complex and frustrating at times, but amusing at other times, and certainly amusing to reflect back on, and we're getting a lot of joy as well as the pain from looking back at Mom and thinking about her. And so that's where I leave you. Thank you all. Thanks, Reverend, and thanks my brothers and for everyone who came out and is here today. It's very nice of you. Thanks to her caregivers who did such a wonderful job for such a long period late in his life, as did my brothers in taking care of her and getting her through things. So finally, thank you. Good night.
But these verses tell us that even if life doesn't go the way that we would have planned it or hoped that it would be, that God is still present in our lives and present advocating on our behalf. I love the stories of hearing about Barbara and the many adventures that she went on and the way that she embraced life, and nothing seemed to hold her back. And I loved hearing about the softening that took, maybe in her later years, when she understood that relationships were the most important things, and perhaps it wasn't all the little check marks that she had made along the way, being the first in so many areas. The treasure of heaven is that of love. Love is what life is about. The love we feel for Barbara is only a part of the love that God has for us, for Barbara, for you, and for me. That love sustained her through life, through the daunting challenges of a world war, helped her work through relationships, hold on to the things that were important, even through times of divorce, to navigate the difficult world of politics, and to recognize the importance of relationships even later in life. The Bible tells us that in spite of losses and challenges that we face, we can never be separated from God. For God's love is never pried away from us. The only way it can go away is if we choose to push it away. As we reflect today, I hope you will consider those things and remember the words that Jesus gave to us. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. For as one whom a mother comforts, so I will comfort you, and you will be comforted. Barbara didn't, as I hear the stories, didn't project a lot of mention of faith along the way. That may be a part of who she was, or it may not have been. I know they participated in religious ceremonies on occasion and went to church and did those things that were expected of those days. But I also think that God understands us, understands our limitations, and doesn't expect us to achieve things that earn our way into heaven. The good news is that Christ accepts us where we are and who we are, and then seeks to lift us up and to make us new. So as we depart today, may we hold on to those promises. May we wish for Barbara and for all of our loved ones that relationship with God, which is everlasting, that guides us in the way that we live and encourages us in times of trial. Thanks be to God for the life of Barbara. May we also find the peace that is available to each one of us as we embrace the God who created us. I invite you to pray with me now, and at the end of the prayer, you're welcome to join in the Lord's Prayer that is there as well. Gracious God, we thank you for gathering us here today. Our hearts are filled with thanksgiving this afternoon for all that Barbara was and experienced and gave to others. We are here today, O God, because we are graced by the love that she shared, sometimes abundantly and sometimes a little bit more withheld. We give thanks for the bonds of faithfulness and affection that she shared with each person here and with so many who are only here in spirit. Thank you for the way that she taught and encouraged and listened to her loved ones. And thank you for the joy of being a family together. We can only trust, dear Lord, that you have now given her something even greater to live for, a place in your home beyond all physical pain, a place where she will one day greet all others who, like her, are bold enough to accept the invitation that you offer to us. Give us wisdom, O Lord, to take your hand and what you offer. And I ask that you come in your reassuring power to this family and the circle of friends whom Barbara loved. Comfort those who grieve. Send to those who mourn people who can give them words of quiet understanding, a warm embrace, a friendly presence. Keep alive in all of us vivid memories of her rare spirit, that we might have opportunity again and again to celebrate the goodness of life and to think to ourselves, oh, how Barbara would have loved being here today. Then challenge us in this tender moment to remember, too, how fleeting and precious our own lives are, the weeks that we have. Not that we might be afraid of what is to come, but that we might be seized with a passion to take hold of what you offer to us here and now. Move us ever more fully to surrender ourselves to your gracious presence for our lives, that our eyes might be opened afresh to the deeper currents of life here on earth, and that we might one day go forth beyond death's door to meet you and all of your faithful followers in that eternal kingdom where tears shall be no more. We pray these prayers in the strong and tender name of Jesus Christ, and continue in our prayer using the words that you left with your disciples as we say together now, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Before I now stargazer movies? That's what they're called. That
Yeah.
totally makes sense. They look like little stars.
Right here. Those.
Yeah.
Aren't they? They're one of my favorites.